My daughter-in-law and her whole clan are coming for Christmas? Perfect. I'm traveling. I say it as my Uber idles at the curb, exhaust puffing in the cold like a dragon. The driveway crunches with half-melted ice. My wreath scratches my coat as I pull the suitcase down the porch steps, and their SUV noses in. Kayla's jaw drops. Matt won't meet my eyes, and her mother clutches a tin of cookies like a grenade. Keys are on the hook, I add, steady as carols leak from the neighbor's inflatable Santa. You wanted Christmas your way. You can handle it. Inside, the cinnamon candle still warms the air, and the countertop gleams. Labels on bins, recipes clipped, a turkey brining in the fridge because I'm not cruel. Just done being the unpaid help. Kayla's mother recovers first, eyebrows climbing. Margaret, you can't be serious. Matt shifts, cheeks pink, murmuring, Mom, we talked about this. Yes, we did. After last year's green bean casserole critique, the your tree is a bit dated, and the way I was thanked with a trash bag and a sigh. My suitcase handle clicks. The front door lets in a slice of December and the promise of quiet. At 67, I've learned that peace sometimes comes stamped with a boarding pass. I'll tell you exactly how it got to this. What they said in our family group chat. The moment I decided boundaries would be my only gift this year. And the fallout you won't believe. If you think holiday sanity and respect belong under every tree, subscribe and come with me through the whole story. I settled into the back seat and pulled the door shut on the gust of cold air, the Uber's heater humming like a lullaby I'd paid for myself. My driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, a friendly, open face framed by a knit beanie with a tiny Ohio State logo on the cuff. Airport, right? He asked. Yes, John Glenn, I said, smoothing my coat over my lap. My fingers trembled, but not from the cold. On the curb, my son was still standing with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, head bent in that way he had when he didn't want to meet my eye. Something he'd learned as a boy when I asked if he'd brushed his teeth and he hadn't. Kayla's jaw was set, her winter white scarf fluffed like armor around her neck. Her mother held that tin of cookies in both hands as if it might explode. The wreath brushed their shoulders as the front door swung wide and let out another breath of cinnamon. Keys are on the hook, I'd said, calm as the duck on a pond that looks serene until you see the frantic legs beneath. You wanted Christmas your way. You can handle it. The driver signaled and pulled away from the curb, tires crunching over the uneven mosaic of old snow. It wasn't heavy enough to be lovely, just enough to keep everything cold to the touch. My house receded in the side mirror, the bow on the wreath small and vulgar in its cheer. I'm Margaret. Most people call me Maggie, though Kayla tried Mags once, and I gently told her that was reserved for the girls I'd known in high school. I'm 67 and a widow. I've lived on the same tree-lined street in Bexley, just east of downtown Columbus, for 34 years. I know when the sycamores fling their last leaves against the gutters, which squirrels won't be shooed from my porch, and which morning the grocery lines at Giant Eagle turn into a friendly stampede as everyone realizes they forgot cranberries again. I taught second grade for decades, could tie 6 shoelaces at once and tell, by the tilt of a chin, when a child was about to cry. I thought those skills would translate to a peaceful retirement full of library book clubs, choir on Sundays at First United Methodist, and a dozen small traditions carried forward like lanterns on a path. I did not count on my daughter-in-law, Kayla, to come into our lives like a brisk new manager arriving to audit a family. About 20 minutes, the driver said. Traffic's not bad. Perfect, I murmured, and slipped off my gloves. The leather left faint marks on the lines across my palms. I am not an extravagant woman, but those gloves were a birthday present to myself 2 years ago, from the little shop in Easton where the salesgirl laughed when I tried on 3 pairs and said in wonder that any of them would be mine if I wanted. For a long time I didn't want. I put off wanting for so many years, fed at little bits of laughter at PTA potlucks and borrowed library paperbacks, promised myself I'd want later, when Matt was grown, when the mortgage was smaller, when the water heater wasn't gasping its last breath, when Robert felt strong again. I'd planned to go to Santa Fe with him when we retired. He loved photographs of red cliffs and stands of sage. We thought it would be something to see, the 2 of us in the golden light. He didn't make it to that golden light, Lung cancer took him in November 8 years ago, and I learned to move through a December that shouted joy when all I had was quiet. And then, Matt married Kayla. He met her at an alumni happy hour, he said, luminous with that hopeful smile boys get when they show you the photograph of the girl with hair that tumbles. She was lovely when I met her, confident, poised, not yet sharp. She hugged me and said, "I've heard so much," as we sat under a patio umbrella at North Star in the short north, eating beet salads she'd declared were much better than any she'd had in New York. She'd lived there for a year after college. It didn't matter which salad you ate in Columbus. It would be less than what she'd had in New York. She slipped into our family like someone rearranging furniture. Ornaments moved to the back of the tree to make room for the new set of matte gold balls. The lighthouse cookie jar, Robert's mother's, migrated from the counter to the cupboard because counters should be clean. She's not unkind in the way some people are unkind. Her edges are wrapped in compliments like tissue. "This is such a cozy kitchen," she'd say, smiling. "I can see why you spend so much time in it." She never said you're old-fashioned, but somehow, I was always hearing it anyway. By the second Christmas after their wedding, she was telling me about charger plates and tablescapes. There was a Pinterest board. "It's collaborative," she said, inviting herself to my kitchen to show me how to fold napkins into little envelopes for candy canes. We just want it elevated. That was the year her mother, Patrice, soft blonde bob, smooth nails the color of a shell, brought her own sugar cookies with iced interpretation of modern snowflakes, and lined my old dented cookie tin with parchment that had a watermark. I admired her skill. I did not argue when she placed them on the good cake stand without asking. "It takes a lot of effort to make it beautiful," Patrice said, and smiled at me as if I had not been making it beautiful in other ways for 4 decades. Sacrifice is a word that doesn't feel like itself. It sounds noble and clean, like something you would place on an altar and admire under the right lighting. The reality is worn hands and grocery store roses. It is tearing strips of old t-shirts to mop up spilled soup when you can't find a clean sponge. It is learning that canned frosting will do when the baby is colicky, and there's no time to wait for butter to soften. It is teaching extra tutoring hours to pay for a science club fee, so your son can build a robot that wins a ribbon at the Franklin County Fair and seeing him beam because you believed he could. It is sitting on the edge of your mother's hospital bed, a loop of years repeating, telling her that you're there and you're not leaving, then closing your eyes in the parking garage to cry because you can't cry next to her. It is pulling out the heavy roasting pan at dawn so the turkey can be in by 7, because Matt used to wake up at 6 and stand barefooted in the kitchen, hair sticking up like a little wheat field, waiting with both hands around a mug of cocoa. And later, when you are bone-tired, it is saying yes when your daughter-in-law asks if you might babysit just this once on a Tuesday, so she can get to her bar class, and then saying yes again and again until Tuesdays are yours. And bar is, you understand, a way she breathes. Sacrifice looks like the night I slept on my side of the bed, curled toward the cool space where Robert should be, and thought, I can do this for everyone, because that is what I have done. When Kayla asked in the group chat they'd named Holiday Logistics if her family could join us this year because it will just be more fun and Mom's dying to see Lily open presents, I said yes. Of course I said yes. I have a guest room and a finished basement and a heart that expands when I think of my granddaughter's curls tousled, her little hands tearing red paper. What I did not say right away was that I could not do everything. I had already bought the turkey from the butcher at Wyland's and placed it in a brine in my extra refrigerator so it would be what everyone hopes for. Moist without being soft, bronzed without bitterness. I had my lists: breakfast strata for Christmas morning, sausage from Thurns, the cinnamon roll dough rising in the garage fridge, the oyster dressing because the recipe was my mother's, and some things you carry because they are a part of you even if no one else wants them. I had made a casserole of mac and cheese the way Lily likes, with the cheesy crust that squeaks when your fork breaks it open. I had labeled bins in the hallway closet: wrapping paper, ribbons, ornaments for the memory tree, ornaments for Kayla's tree. Because the year she told me the red and green didn't go with her aesthetic, I started a second tree with all white lights and even showed her the Pottery Barn catalog like I was a contestant in a manners competition. I had sharpened knives, polished silver, and left recipes clipped under magnets that my grandfather, who had worked at Westinghouse, brought home when the company still made fridges as big as trucks. "Could we do a vegan option?" Kayla wrote, an hour later. "Madison's trying it this month." Madison is her sister. Madison tries new things with the rhythm of seasons. Last spring it was knitting. By summer she had a fox pelt and jewelry made from seed beads. "We are all explorers," I try to remember. And, Kayla added in the next bubble, "We'd like to open presents on Christmas Eve this year. It's just nicer when you can sleep in. We started doing it at my parents'. Tradition shifts, right? Also, Mom and Dad, plus Trevor and Alicia and the baby will bring their board so we can have a charcuterie spread. If you could pick up a few extra things at Costco or Trader Joe's to round it out, that would be great." I wrote, "Of course I can pick up a few things, but can everyone bring their favorites and plan to help in the kitchen? We will be 12, and it's a lot for one person." The little dots bounced as someone typed, then paused. Matt sent a thumbs up. Patrice wrote, "We'll be there with bells on." "Don't worry, sweetie. We know how to entertain." That "sweetie" sat on my tongue like a piece of ice I was expected to swallow. 2 days later, Kayla texted again. "We're going to do a different tree topper this year, okay? Ours is just more neutral. The star you have is very traditional. My star. It's a little wobbly, with one point bent where Matt, at 3, had held it in both hands and insisted on helping. Robert lifted him, a giggling armful in plaid pajamas, and I snapped a photograph with hands that shook because my heart was full enough to spill. That star sits in a shoebox that still smells like the basement cedar blocks and the frankincense sachet my friend Eileen gave me 10 years ago. If my tree is very traditional, I suppose it is because my life has been the gathering of little moments that turn into something you can lean against. Last year, after we ate, after plates had been carried and scraped and spun through hot water, I stood at the sink rolling up my sleeves, feeling the pleasant ache in my back. Kayla slid next to me, hair perfect after 12 hours. She doesn't wilt, and said lightly, "Your green bean casserole is different. I think it's the canned soup. My mom makes it with Haricott's verts, and it's just lighter. We'll do that next time." Patrice drifted behind her, nodding like a buoy. I said, "The recipe is from my mother. It tastes like home." Kayla smiled at me the way you smile at someone who is anxious about a doctor's appointment. "We'll elevate it," she said, and patted my shoulder. Then she handed me a giant black garbage bag and said, "Could you, when you're done, make sure this gets out to the can? It's going to smell." I married at 21. Robert and I moved into a 2-bedroom duplex with a squeaky screen door that squealed every time you opened it like a small indignity. We had a baby 2 years later. I worked, he worked. We lived on lists and love. And when the money ran out, we ate scrambled eggs with ketchup and didn't tell anyone. He got sick, and I shaved him and held him and didn't tell anyone when I was afraid in the middle of the night and stood in the hallway listening to the sound of him breathing. Matt's teeth needed braces. I sold the ring my grandmother had given me, the emerald that had only ever left its box to be admired and returned, and I did not tell him. I told myself I would buy it back. I told myself I was a river, that I would prove to my son that love is a current that keeps you. I did not ever imagine then that I would stand at my own sink in my own kitchen and be handed a garbage bag by someone who had never eaten scrambled eggs with ketchup because there was nothing else to eat. The week the group chat messages piled up like snow you don't shovel. There was a request for the guest room for Patrice because she's light sensitive and the basement won't work, and a note that the baby needed the other guest room because we can't have him in with Lily. She wakes him. That left, by deduction, my own bedroom for someone else. Kayla didn't say it. Her dots bounced, stopped, bounced. Matt texted me privately, as if we were co-conspirators, then sent a shrugging emoji. "I'm sure we can figure it out," he wrote. "You could sleep on the pullout for a few nights. It's comfortable." He meant it. He thought he was being reasonable. He remembers being 10 and making a fort with couch cushions and sleeping on the floor for fun. He does not feel the cold in his bones the way I do. I said it out loud, in my kitchen, to the refrigerator like the turkey could hear me. "Margaret, You are not a doormat. You have taught first graders to say please and thank you, and you can remind adults about manners. You are also allowed to leave. Peace, I told myself, sometimes looks like a boarding pass. I booked a flight to Albuquerque because Southwest was cheaper, and there was a shuttle to Santa Fe. I Googled photographs at midnight, farolitos glowing like small hope along mud-colored walls, and thought of the paper bags my students had decorated with cut-out snowflakes and placed along the school hallway, lighting the way to the concert one year when we had a custodian who used his own money to buy tea lights. Santa Fe had always been the place Robert and I said we'd go for Christmas someday, when we could. I picked a little inn within walking distance of the plaza, one of those adobe buildings with wooden vigas and a fireplace in the lobby. The description said the room smelled like piñon smoke. I imagined my coat holding that smell the way it had held pine and cinnamon all these Decembers. I then went to the butcher and asked for one of the little hams, the kind you can heat in 90 minutes, because I am not cruel. I did not leave a bare fridge. I made a pan of lasagna, covered it tightly, and wrote, "Bake at 350, covered 30 Main, uncovered 15 Main," because as much as I needed to go, I couldn't release the part of me that cooks for those I love. I left a note on the counter that said, "The turkey's brining. Roasting instructions taped inside cabinet. There's cider in the crock pot. Please use coasters on the table." It was my mother's. As the Uber merged onto I-670, the sun lifted over the low skyline, turning the Scioto River to a slice of steel. The driver, his name was James, there on the little dashboard screen, coughed into his elbow and turned down the radio station playing Nat King Cole. "Family visit?" he asked. "Sort of," I said, and smiled. It felt like telling a secret to a stranger you will never see again. "I'm going to Santa Fe." "Nice. My aunt lives in Albuquerque. Says the green chili alone is worth the trip." I believe it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew it would. I let it buzz. We passed the mural in the short north with the wings. Someone meek in a hoodie stood in front of it, looking brave. The terminal was not crowded yet. The business travelers already through, the vacationers slow with their bags. I nodded at the TSA agent who smiled with the kind of tired that says she has wrapped her last gift at 2 a.m. more than once. I took off my shoes, placed them neatly before the line like a small handshake. In the Starbucks line, I ordered a peppermint mocha, the indulgence of it, the child in me delighted, and a sandwich I would pick at, because my stomach was taut with something that felt like both grief and relief. On the way to the gate, I did finally look at my phone. 111 messages, the group chat banner announced, in the 20 minutes since I'd said, "Keys are on the hook." The first was from Kayla. "I don't understand. Are you serious?" Then Patrice. "Margaret, I'm certain this is a misunderstanding. We're pulling in." Matt, separately. "Mom, we talked about this." I scrolled. Kayla again. "This is not okay. We can't just be dumped in your house." I sat, back straight, coffee on my knee, and typed slowly, "You are not dumped. You are invited. The house is ready. There is food, a clean kitchen, a plan. I'm not host this year. I'll be back on the 27th. Please be considerate of the neighbors. The garbage goes out Thursday night. Water the amaryllis in the dining room. It wants a little drink, not a soak. Merry Christmas." There was a pause. And then, like an orchestra tuning, everyone chimed in. Patrice. "I can't believe you would do this now." Madison. "Wait, we have to cook?" Trevor sent a gif of a man fainting on a couch. Kayla. "This is about last year, isn't it? Why didn't you speak up?" I did not point out that I had. Speaking up, when you are the woman who has quietly made sure everyone else is comfortable, is like trying to shout underwater. It gets caught in your throat. It sounds rude, even to you. The kinder part of me wanted to tell Kayla about the star and the garbage bag, and the way I had floated through my own house like a ghost, cleaning in my Christmas apron while everyone else napped. The new part of me, the part that had booked a ticket, did not. The plane to Albuquerque boards from gate B25, and is always a surprise to those who think New Mexico is another country. I found a seat by the window and buckled my belt. A young couple behind me argued softly about whether to rent a car. A man across the aisle nodded off as soon as the airplane door was shut. I powered off my phone so I would not be tempted to keep reading. We rose over the patchwork of the city, and then over fields stitched with snow and thaw. Ohio becoming an ordered quilt, then a white blur, then clouds. I have never been afraid of flying. When Robert and I went to Florida with Matt the year he turned 12, Robert squeezed my hand when we lifted, plumes of cloud rolling past like a story you could step into if you opened the door. He liked being grounded. He liked the mower lines neat on the yard, the way you could see the work of your hands. I like the moment of floating. I like the illusion that you can see your life small enough to understand. Above the clouds, everything looks placid, even the storm. It will be there when you come down. It just loses some of its snarl while you're up here. The shuttle to Santa Fe smelled of dust and aftershave. Out the window, the light changed. It was like stepping into a sepia photograph and discovering it is living color. The mountains hovered, blue at the edges. The pines were a darker green than mine at home. My breath felt a little thin with the altitude, but I didn't mind. I took my time, stepping onto the square of sidewalk at the drop-off as if the earth might rock, and it did. In that way a new place always does. The clerk at the inn had hair in 2 braids like a girl in a photograph in a magazine from the 60s, and she slid me a map with a smile that sparkled but was not silly. "Hot chocolate at 4, she said, "in the lobby. Piñon and cedar in the fireplace. We have cookies." The cookies were biscochitos, I learned, crisp and smelling faintly of anise. I ate one as if it were a blessing. That night, wrapped in a scarf I'd bought from a man on the plaza whose hands were chapped and kind, I walked the farolito-lit paths with everyone else. It did feel like the whole town had come out, but it was a hush, not a bustle. Children held their parents' hands. The paper bags glowed with candlelight, their tops folded like soft hats. A teenage boy brought his grandmother a bench from somewhere and settled it by a wall so she could sit and be eye level with the lights. I thought of my grandmother, who made pot roast that melted the way good food does. I wondered what she would say about my leaving. I imagined her nodding and saying, "Well, good for you, Margaret, good for you." A brass quartet played "O Come, All Ye Faithful," and there was a moment when the trumpet caught a note that made someone at my shoulder wipe a tear. There is more than one way to be faithful. Sometimes you are faithful to others. Sometimes you learn to be faithful to yourself. Back at the inn, I checked my phone. There were photographs from my house. The tree in the front room twinkling with white lights, and the new neutral topper I had not agreed to. The charcuterie boards laid out like little cities across my table. Pajamas in red and cream on my couch. Patrice and Madison clinking flutes of something pale on my steps. There was an Instagram story of Lily and the baby pulling at the dog's ears and Patrice's "We're making memories" caption. In a corner, my nativity scene had been moved to the mantle's edge to make room for a frame that said, "Our first Christmas cloud," a reference I did not understand. The dog, a labradoodle the size of a small pony, lounged across Robert's armchair, muddy paws draped over the upholstery I have guarded like an old-fashioned dragon, and I pressed my fingers into the leather arm of the inn chair until my knuckles whitened. I did not text. I did not like. I reminded myself I had done what I needed to do. Removed myself from the place where resentment had taken up residence like a traveler who brought luggage and closed the guest room door with a determined click. Matt texted me late. My time. "Mom, can you call?" I typed, "Tomorrow morning. I love you." "Love you," he wrote back. And there was a hush in those words I know from his childhood, when the nightlight glowed and storms rattled the windows. In the morning, I woke to a sky so blue it was almost impolite. I had slept deeply, as if the high desert had patted my shoulder and said, "Hush then." I poured coffee from the little machine on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed with the cup warm between my hands. When I called, Matt picked up on the first ring. "Mom," he said. Exhale, like he was bracing a door. Kayla's upset." "I know," I said. I saw the pictures. There was a silence that was not empty. He is 38, but sometimes when I talk to him, I still see his cowlick and the freckle on the bridge of his nose that you could only see in summer. You blindsided us, he said finally. I told you weeks ago I wasn't doing this alone, I said. I kept my voice soft. I am not interested in winning. I'm interested in not losing myself. You said we'd figure it out. Figuring it out turned into your mother sleeping on her own couch. It turned into changing my traditions in my house so other people would be comfortable. It's just, Mom, it's one Christmas. It was not one Christmas. It was 1,000 justs. It was just moving the cookies to the cake stand. Just opening presents at night. Just bringing a dog. Just rearranging the mantle. Just a different star. Just being flexible. Just sleeping on the couch. I love you, Matthew, I said. And I love your wife. I love my granddaughter. That is why I made sure there's food and heat and a plan. I am taking care of myself by not being there this year. He breathed. I could hear Kayla's voice in another room, higher, animated. They're going to say you abandoned them, he said. You can tell them the truth, I said. Tell them I set a boundary. I left you a brined turkey and instructions. He laughed, unexpected and sharp, like a hiccup of humor that escaped on its own. You did, he said. Kayla doesn't know how to truss a turkey. I pictured her thin fingers, the manicure immaculate, tangling with cotton butcher's twine. I pictured Patrice leaning in, offering advice in that way she recorded as generosity, and I heard as direction. I softened. I am not trying to punish. I want them to learn how it feels to carry the holiday, even if just this once. I think we need to talk when you're back, he said. Actually, I know we do. Yes, I said. At my kitchen table, on the 28th. You, me, Kayla. We will make a plan for next year that doesn't require any one person to be the engine of the whole train. I'll tell her, he said, and I listened to the quiet of a house that human voices had not invaded yet, footsteps gentle in the hall of the inn, the breath of the building itself. After we hung up, I walked to the cathedral basilica and sat in a back pew for a while. Not because I wanted to talk to God about my hurt, because the quiet was thick and kind. I lit a candle. I let the flames stand for all the Decembers I should have said, I need help, but worried that asking would be seen as failing. I let it stand for the women I know. Eileen with her arthritic hands, Teresa from the library who bits the tape with her teeth when the dispenser runs out during the wrapping station, that keep making everything smooth for the people they love until the day they cannot. I ate lunch at a cafe where the server called everyone Hon, with no meanness in it. I chose pozole with red chile and made myself sit through the heat. It felt honest. I wandered into a gallery and bought a small postcard of a painting of cottonwoods in winter, the sky wide and full of a promise no one wrote. I thought, I will mail this to myself, and when it arrives I will put it on the fridge under the magnet shaped like an apple that one of my students gave me 20 years ago, and it will say, you did a hard thing, and you were not cruel, and you deserve a postcard now and then. The phone kept buzzing throughout the day, a far vibration in my purse. Kayla sent a message with a photograph of the turkey in the oven. We figured it out. There was gravy on the stovetop that looked like it might crust if no one wiped it. I did not offer advice. Patrice sent a photograph of the table set with my china, the Haviland with the tiny green garlands. The wine glasses were wrong, but it was fine. Underneath, there was a comment I could not ignore. We managed without the fuss. Maybe change is good after all. The edge of that sentence nicked something. The fuss is what I call the touch of nutmeg in the eggnog. It is the way I iron the tablecloth on the table after I lay it so the creases fall straight. It is the handwritten place cards with little sprigs of rosemary. The fuss is my love language. I breathed in. I breathed out. I typed, I'm glad you're enjoying it. By evening, there was an incident with the dog and the armchair. Matt texted me, riddled with remorse. He was muddy. I'm so sorry. I told them not to let him up. He added 3 mop emojis. I smiled, despite myself, because my son is 38 and sending me pictures of cleaning supplies because he knows me. Don't worry, I typed. There's a bottle of the cleaner under the sink. In the caddy to the left, The cloths are on top. Somewhere behind all the bustle and the indignation was a small victory, and I tried to name it without expanding it like a birthday balloon. They were doing it. They were cooking and cleaning and managing the bedtimes and the tantrums and the blazing of air through the radiators when someone set the thermostat too high and the heater moaned. That night, as I wrapped the new scarf around my shoulders, I felt it settle like a promise. On Christmas morning, I walked early, the air crisp enough to pinch. A man in a red jacket jogged past with a Santa hat bobbing on his head. A woman in a long skirt with her hair in a gray braid stood by a fence, looking west. "You from here?" she asked when I paused near her to look too. "No," I said. "Ohio." "Long way for Christmas," she said. No judgment, just somewhere between curiosity and acceptance. "I needed quiet," I said. She nodded. "Sometimes that's the loudest thing," she said, and smiled a small smile that sat in my pocket all day. Back home, they opened presents on Christmas Eve. They posted videos of ripping paper and squeals. Lily got the dollhouse I had chosen carefully after 3 trips to a toy store where the clerk recognized me by the 3rd visit and told me the differences between the wooden stairs and the plastic ones. Kayla wrote, "From Santa, aka Mom and Dad," and I was not mentioned. I watched the video once, and then closed my eyes. I remembered Matt's 3rd Christmas, when we hid the train set in the hall closet, and Robert did not sleep because he wanted to get it laid out just so, and I made cinnamon rolls that unfurled like flowers. I remembered the way the house smelled then, yeasty and sweet, and the way Robert's hands smelled like the oil for the engine. I refuse to be bitter that tradition shifts. I can honor what was without punishing what is. In the afternoon, I FaceTimed with Lily. She had frosting on her chin. "Grandma, watch me," she shouted, and showed me every ornament, every cookie, every corner of the house I knew so well through what she noticed now. The twinkle lights at her height, the cookies that looked like stars, the dog's nose in her lap. Kayla hovered in the background, tired and not unkind. "We miss you," she said, and for a second, her eyes softened in a way that reminded me she is too, someone's daughter. "I'll be home soon," I said. "Save me a cookie." The evening of the 27th, after the shuttle, after the flight, after the soft ache of the city shifted back to my street's sturdy sound, I stood at my door with my suitcase and my keys in my hand, like the beginning of a story. The porch light was on. My wreath was slightly askew. There was a small black smudge on the stone I could not identify. I breathed in the smell that has been mine long enough to feel like a shape my body recognizes. I stepped inside. The kitchen was clean, mostly. There was a wine ring on the counter I rubbed with a damp cloth. The cabinets had been shuffled, an odd jar of cloves on the mug shelf, but nothing major. The garbage had been taken out. The amaryllis in the dining room had opened, its petals like silk ears. On the table sat a note. Kayla's handwriting is neat, little squares with tails. "Margaret, thank you for leaving the food. Thank you for the lists. I didn't understand how much there is to do. I'm still angry, but I think I'm angry because I felt abandoned. That's a big word. Maybe I mean surprised. I'm not used to surprises. Let's talk. Also, I washed the slipcover on the chair. I'm sorry about the dog. He didn't mean to. Patrice says hello. Matt says stop rolling your eyes at that. See you on the 28th. Kay." I stood at the counter, hand on the note, and exhaled. There, in the kitchen that had held so many Decembers, I turned on the kettle. I took out my mug, the one with the chip on the rim, which always makes me drink from the other side, and made tea. I took out one of the cookies they had left in a tin, which had icing that had bled a little, imperfect. I stood and sipped and let the steam lick my face, and in that moment, my life felt like it fit my hands again. The next day, at 3, Matt and Kayla came. Patrice did not. It was just the 3 of us and the sound of the clock in the hall. Kayla looked tired in a way that made her look younger and more human. Matt hovered, trying to lift the words out of the room like a thing he could carry. We sat at the table. I poured coffee. I set down a plate of store-bought cookies, and Kayla laughed and said, "No elevating." And I laughed too, because humor is a soft cloth. I needed you to understand, I said when the small talks fizzled, that a holiday is not a performance for an audience, and I'm not your event planner. I love doing it. I love making it pretty. I love the fuss. But I don't love being told that what I do isn't good enough, or that tradition is only valuable if it fits someone else's picture. Kayla stared into her cup and nodded. I like that picture, she said. I've always liked things ordered. So do I said. I like them ordered in a way that honors where they came from. Matt looked back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match with stakes. We'll alternate, he said quickly. Or we'll host. Or we'll get takeout from that deli you like. Or, we will talk like adults, I said, and he grinned sheepishly. And we will agree on a plan that doesn't leave anyone feeling used. Next year, if your family comes, they bring a full plan with them and they do it. If we host, there will be 2 trees, and the star stays. We will eat some things because they make someone happy, and some things because they're elevated. If I come to your house, which you will, Kayla said, we owe you that. No one owes me anything, I said. We owe each other kindness. Kayla swallowed and then did something that surprised me. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I can do that, she said. I can be kinder. We went over details. It was not a perfect meeting. There were moments when Kayla bristled and I felt my jaw set, and we both had to breathe. But when they left, there were no garbage bags handed to me like a duty. There was no star placed in a box. There was the sense of a path, wobbly in spots. But there, after the door closed, I stood in the quiet house and felt the echo of their footsteps fade. I am not naive. I know there will be more negotiations. I know there will be years when my house is full, and years when I am the one packing a little suitcase and making sure I bring the crosswords I like. I know there will be times when Kayla says something that makes me feel like a relic, and times when I say something that makes her feel criticized. But I also know this. I will not disappear into the kitchen and allow myself to be both engine and invisible. I will not sleep on my own couch so that someone else's comfort is maintained at the expense of my bones. I will not hand over my star. I will hold out instead the kind of love that is the opposite of a performance. The kind that says, this is who I am, and I will meet you here. That night, with the dishwasher humming, I took the little postcard from my bag and stuck it to the refrigerator under the apple magnet. Cottonwoods in winter, sky-wide, light like a kindness. I stood there a long time, and then I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. In my room, in my house, the sound of December steady as the breath of someone sleeping beside you. The conflict, if it comes again, will find me ready. Not hard, not cold. Ready, like a woman who has learned to sit at her own table and ask for the seat to be comfortable. Ready, like someone who knows that peace is not the absence of other people's needs, but the presence of boundaries. Ready, like a river that has seen flood and drought and keeps moving. Ready, because this year, I went to Santa Fe and stood in a street lit with small paper bags that burned gently and did not go out. And I learned that I can leave and I can return, and the world will not tilt off its axis. It will greet me, and I will greet it. And we will begin again. The day after our sit-down at my kitchen table, I woke before the light and lay listening to the heater kick on. It's an old system, the kind that sighs before it does its job, like an old man putting a hand to his knee. I've come to love that sound. It means the house is looking after me, not the other way around. My phone was on the nightstand, dark and quiet, and for once I didn't reach for it immediately. I watched the way the early gray pressed against the curtains and thought of the plaza in Santa Fe, the way the light there held its breath right before dusk, as if the town itself were waiting for the candles to catch. On my dresser, the postcard of winter cottonwoods leaned against the mirror. Thick trunks, a sky so open it felt like a promise. I had meant to stick it to the refrigerator with the apple magnet, but I'd left it there for a reason I didn't name until I lay looking at it and realized I wanted it to be the first thing I saw when I decided something was mine to decide. It's funny how a 4x6 piece of cardstock can feel like an anchor. Eileen called it 9. She has a voice that always sounds like she's about to laugh, even when what she's telling you is that she had to have another cortisone shot in her thumb. "We missed you in choir," she said. "But I saw your pictures. Farolitos, huh? Pretty." "They were," I said. I could hear the shuffle of paper on her end, the way she fusses with bills when she talks on the phone. Years of being married to an accountant. Numbers are her tea leaves. "You ready for Sunday?" she asked. "We've got Hark, the Herald, and then Linda's setting out those bad-for-you cookies that taste like high school bake sales." "I'll be there," I said, and meant it. I liked the idea of standing in the sanctuary and letting the voices stack like layers of quilt, warmth made audible. At 11:30, I ran into Teresa at Giant Eagle. She was wearing a puffy coat, the color of a robin's egg, and pushing a cart with a wheel that moaned in protest. "Margaret," she said, popping up in front of the cranberries. "We talked about you at the library. I told them you finally took a trip for you. We were all a tiny bit jealous." "Jealous of me?" I said, and smiled because it felt like a compliment and an absurdity. "Of your gumption," she said. "I still haven't told my niece I'm not doing her shower this spring." She said, "It's only 80 people," and I said it's only 80 paper plates, and I think she thought I was joking. We stood there, blocking the cans of pumpkin, nodding in that way women of our age nod when we recognize the edge of ourselves and the years of smoothing that edge for other people. "You could have it at the church," I said. "Use their chairs. You should come to the 12th night party," Teresa said suddenly, brightening. "Maybe you could do that thing you do with the Rosemary Place cards. Linda was asking if you'd be willing to." I pictured Kayla's, "We'll elevate it," and something went tight in my chest. "I'll bring Buckeyes," I said gently. "Not cards. Just candy." "Good for you," she said, and put a bag of baby carrots in her cart like it was a prize. That night, Matt called again. It was nearly 9, and the sound of the game trickled through from somewhere on his end. "Do you have the sleepy time tea?" he asked. "In the cupboard left of the stove," I said. "Top shelf." I looked there. The shelf with the mugs had cloves. Things were moved. "Top shelf," I repeated, "behind the little saucepan." I put it there after my mother came to stay and said it made her sleep. Sometimes I think spirits remember where we put things. He laughed a little. "Kayla asked me to ask you about New Year's," he said then. "Her mom wants to do something. Casual." Casual meant 3 kinds of champagne and napkins with gold dots. Casual meant me in the kitchen doing dishes while other people made toasts. "I'll be home," I said, "but I'm going to pass this year. I'm tired." "Okay," he said, and I heard the word land and stay. Usually it tried to bounce back with an explanation attached, like a child with a ball. The ball didn't bounce. There was silence, and I felt both the sting and the relief. It's a funny thing to realize your son is learning new ways to talk to you at the same time you are learning new ways to talk to him. Kayla texted me the next morning. "Pistachia Vera does a galette des rois for Epiphany," she wrote. "My mom always does one. It's just nice." "That sounds lovely," I typed back. I stopped there. My thumb hovered, wanting to add a sentence to fit myself into the space she was offering. I did not. A heartbeat later, the dots appeared. "We're doing a small thing," her next message read. "Trevor and Alicia, the baby, my parents. Matt says you might want to do something too. Maybe we can do them together? Everyone could come to your place after?" A year ago, the thought of Kayla's family in my house again so soon would have set my jaw aching. Now, a different thought formed, not fully, but like a snowflake landing on dark wool. "I'm doing a 12th night open house," I wrote, surprised at my own thumb. 5 to 8. Come if you'd like. Bring the cake. Leave the dog at home. The dots blinked, stopped. "Okay," she replied. And then, a beat later, "Can I help? I can do a cheese board." "Bring whatever makes you happy," I typed. "I'm making chili and cornbread and Buckeyes." "Buckeyes," she wrote. Yes. After I sent the text, I stood in my kitchen, hands flat on the counter, and let the idea fill the room. 12th night. When I was a girl, my mother tucked a dime into the king cake, and whoever found it got to pick their dessert for Sunday dinner all through January. We never did it with any seriousness. Never made Epiphany into anything official, but I always liked the thought of wrapping up the holiday with a little ceremony. I had not made a big deal of it when Robert was alive, because our Decembers were already full in the way a river is full after rain. This year, the idea felt like laying a small piece of myself on the table. Not a performance, not a showcase, a gathering that had my fingerprints on it, quiet and sturdy and maybe a little old-fashioned. I was allowed to like old things. I walked to the hall closet and pulled down the bin marked Memory Tree. The star was in a shoebox that once held Matt's sneakers, Jordans, printed along the side in a font that made me smile. Inside the box, the star lay wrapped in tissue that had been folded and refolded so many times it bore its own creases like a map. I lifted it carefully. One point bent where Matt had held it at 3 and giggled. I could still see the sugar on his lip from the cookies he'd stolen and the way Robert's arm had trembled, too much love making him strong. The shoebox had always smelled faintly of cedar and a deeper spice. Frankincense sachet, thank you, Eileen. Now a whisper more pignon from the scarf I had tucked on top when I got home because I wanted the smells to get to know each other. I set the star on the dining room table. The table is my mother's. The one with the carved legs and the stubborn water ring from the banana pudding someone set down without a trivet in 1978. I stood looking at the star, and it was as if every December I'd lived unfurled in front of me. All those morning coffees before the house woke. The year Matt cried because his favorite ornament had broken, and I pretended to talk to the tree, and told him it was okay to be broken sometimes, and he had laughed, even through tears. The Christmas after Robert died, when the tree looked like a stranger in my house until I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark, and let it glow at me until I didn't feel like I was intruding. The year Kayla moved the lighthouse cookie jar, and I said nothing. The year the dog's muddy paw prints dried into a pattern on the rug, and I scrubbed them until my shoulders ached, and no one noticed until I pointed it out. The year I booked a ticket and stepped onto a shuttle and watched small paper bags glow like tiny confidences, and understood something about my own life. I lifted the star, found the smudge on the bent point with my thumb, and polished it with the corner of my apron. An object only becomes a symbol when you tell yourself it means something. It is both cheap metal and the thing that lifts your life out of the everyday for a second and lets you look at it doused in light. You are my decision, I told it, and smiled at the silliness of speaking to an ornament and at the deep truth of it. I could have made the whole event quiet. Only church friends and my neighbor Mr. Feldman, who brings because he doesn't trust my knife to do what he wants. I decided not to be secretive, not because I wanted to shame anyone, because what had been private, for too long, had kept me in the loop of being small. I called Eileen and Teresa. I texted my friend Donna from book club, who works at the Franklin Park Conservatory and knows the names of plants the way some people know sports statistics. I told Mr. Feldman, and he said, "I'll bring coleslaw." And I said, "No, just you." And he said, "Then I'll bring paper towels because you always run out." And I laughed because it was true. Then I texted Kayla again. "Bring Lily early if she wants to help me put on the star," I wrote. "We can do it together." "She'll love that," Kayla answered. And then, still, "I think my mom is bringing a new topper for the galette table. She has this thing with stars. You can put it on the cake table," I typed. Not the tree. I expected a reply that bristled. What came back was a single word. "Okay." In the days before, I found myself breathing easier. I moved through my lists with the practiced pace of a woman who has hosted more holidays than she can count, but the steps felt different under my feet. I chopped onions for chili and made myself stop before the tears started. A trick I learned from Eileen, who swears by a breath through the nose and a sip of cold water. I stirred beans and thought things through. My teacher brain surfaced, the part that knows how to make a plan without turning it into commandments. I wrote out a menu and taped it to the fridge, not for show, but for me. I set out the good flatware because I felt like it, because the daily forks have had their share of casseroles and deserve a rest. I polished the water ring with oil, not because it would disappear, but because it looks brighter when you pay attention to it. I bought cornbread mix from the market and didn't scold myself for not soaking cornmeal overnight like someone on television says you should. On the afternoon of the 6th, the sky over Bexley turned the kind of pale that glows with the threat of snow. I was glad. The last light dusting had melted into something gray. This looked fresh. I opened the front door to shake out the entry rug and saw Mrs. Carter across the way bringing in her mail and slippers and waved. She waved back, her hand mittened, and shouted, "It's coming!" Even at 67, even in boots, there is a child in me who thrills when the first flakes hover in the air like a secret only you and the sky know. At 4, I pulled on my leather gloves. The ones from the shop in Easton, the ones I bought for myself on a day when I decided I could, and brushed snow off the stoop. The gloves were supposed to be too nice for tasks like that, but I don't believe in saving everything for company. My own hands count as special. When I came back inside, the smell of chili and onions wrapped itself around me like an old sweater. I set a bowl of clementines on the counter. I like bright things on the table in winter. I laid out small bowls for sour cream, shredded cheese, chopped scallions. Not elevated, plentiful. At 4:30 the doorbell rang. The bell's tone funny because once, long ago, Robert tried to fix it and made it sound like a school buzzer. Lily all but burst through before I could get to the door, her cheeks pink. "Grandma," she shouted. "We got to see salt trucks." "You did?" I said, delighted. Because salt trucks are magic when you are 5. They throw salt on the road like it's a snow day, and the road is a pretzel, she said, and I laughed, bright and real. Kayla stood behind her, hair in a low ponytail, no makeup, the brim of a hat pushing her hair toward her eyes, making her look younger, or maybe just less arranged. "I brought the cake," she said, lifting a box with both hands. The bakery label was, indeed, Pistacia Vera. And a cheese board. Nothing weird, just cheddar and manchego and grapes. "Grapes are never weird," I said, and stepped back to let them in. "Boots off, please." It is a rule in my house I have not always enforced, because I grew up with the idea that asking people to take off their shoes is impolite. It is not impolite. It is my house. Kayla crouched and helped Lily pull off her little boots. Snow shook off in soft flurries to the rug. The galette des rois was beautiful in the way Pistacia Vera always makes things beautiful. Flaky, golden, with a paper crown that looked like something a kind child would make. "We can put that on the dessert table," I said, and over Kayla's shoulder saw Patrice step up onto the porch, her coat white as the snow falling around her, a box in her hands that looked like it had been wrapped by an advertisement. Madison followed, cheeks flushed, darling red hat perched just so. Behind them, Matt carried a grocery paper bag that sagged in the middle. He caught my eye and looked at the floor, then looked up again. He knows my face. "Margaret," Patrice sang as she came in. "This is cozy." She set the box down and unwrapped a glass star like the ones sold in modern-style stores, clear and angular. "We brought this," she said, "for your table. It just adds a little sparkle." "For the table," I agreed, and pointed to the sideboard, where I had set the candle holders that Robert's mother gave us, and the pine cones Lily and I had gathered 3 winters ago, and painted with a light brush of silver. "That will look lovely there." She blinked, the kind of blink that says she'd pictured something else. "Of course," she said, and set it down. Matt, carrying the paper bag, hovered in the doorway like a boy on the edge of asking if he could stay for dinner at a friend's. He said, "brought chips and more paper towels. Mr. Feldman said you'd need them." I felt my lips tip into a smile I could not keep back. "He's a wise man," I said, "appropriate for the day." People came like the snow, first in flakes, then in clusters. Eileen with a tin of oatmeal cookies and that smile. Teresa with a dish of pickled beets. The magenta so pretty it would stain your heart. Mr. Feldman, triumphant with his roll of paper towels and a small jar of coleslaw. "Just for me, because I can't not," he said, and I took it like a secret handshake. Donna with a pot of something that steamed and made the kitchen look like a commercial for winter. The room filled with voices that weren't competing to be the prettiest. My choir director and his wife came too, and he sang "We Three Kings" under his breath at one point, and I shushed him with a laugh and he said, "Occupational hazard." It was what I wanted, a room crowded not with obligation, but with intention. Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma," she whispered in a theater whisper that carried across the room, When do we do the star? Soon, I whispered back and put my hand over hers. Her fingers were sticky from a clementine. The little stickiness felt like a blessing. At 6, I tapped a spoon against the side of my mug the way I had tapped a teacher's pen against the side of my desk and asked for a hush. "Friends," I said, and the room quieted. Not all at once, but in the way snow hushes a street. Soft, gradual. "We're going to do a small thing," I said. "It's just for me, for us, for my house." Kayla stood near the desk where the neutral tree topper had been set earlier. I saw the way she looked at the tree. Our tree. The one with white lights and red ornaments and the lighthouse cookie jar now set out proudly on the counter again. Patrice stood by the sideboard, hand on the glass star, as if she were reminding it she'd placed it there. Matt had Lily on his hip. He makes it look easy, the way some people do. The grace of it learned at 2 a.m. with a baby who won't sleep. I went to the shoebox on the table under the window and lifted the star. The room was warm enough that my own breath felt thick and sweet. Chili and cinnamon and snow and the wool of my scarf hanging by the door. "This is our star," I said, and I held it up the way a teacher holds up the first book of the year. One point is bent because a little boy we love held it tight when he was 3 and giggled so hard he almost dropped it. His father's hands were strong enough to lift him and soft enough to let him place it himself. I didn't mean to do a speech. It came out of me like a song you didn't realize you've been humming. "We've had other stars," I said. "We've had years when this star felt too heavy to lift. We've had years when someone wanted a different star. This year, I need this one. Because it is mine. Because it speaks for the life I have made in this house. Because I have bent and bent until I learned I have a shape that deserves to be kept." Lily reached out and touched one bent point with her finger. "It's pokey," she said, intense with concentration. "It is," I said. "It is also beautiful." I could feel the room listening. Not polite nodding, the kind of listening that has belonging in it. I took the star and stepped toward the tree. Kayla moved, a reflex maybe, toward the desk where the neutral topper sat, then stopped. Her eyes flicked to mine. It is a peculiar thing, to feel someone learn to see you in a new light while you are standing under your own lamps. "Grandma, up," Lily said, and I handed the star to Matt. He lifted Lily, and she squealed, and Kayla's hand went to her mouth the way a mother's hand goes to her heart without permission. Lily set the star onto the top of the tree. It wobbled and then found its place, the bent point fitting the bend of a branch like it had been made to do exactly that. The lights caught in it, cheap plastic turning to something that looked like crystal because the room had decided to make it so. Someone clapped. It was Mr. Feldman first. He is not afraid to be the one who starts the thing other people meant to do. "It looks right," he said. And in his voice was every year I've known him, every time he has shoveled my walk before I woke. "Now the cake," Patrice said, a little too brightly, and set the paper crown on the table, doing what she does. A redirect to the comfortable location of control. Traditionally, the youngest goes under the table and calls who gets each slice. "We can do that," I said. "But first, I need one more small thing." I went to the refrigerator and took the postcard from the mirror. I had put it back where it belonged that morning, but some part of me wanted it for this. I held it up. Cottonwoods and sky. "When Robert and I were young," I said, "we meant to go to Santa Fe. We didn't make it together. This year I went. It is not the same. It is also not lesser. I am going to tuck this into the box with the star, so that when we bring it out next year, I remember that I can do hard things and soft ones at the same time." It could have sounded like a sermon. It didn't. Eileen made a soft sound that wasn't a sob and wasn't not, and Kayla, who has a perfection in her that is a hard shell and a tender fruit at once, nodded. "That makes sense," she said, in a voice that sounded exactly like the girl she must have been before she learned to be so organized. "I'm sorry I moved your things before I knew why they mattered." I looked at her and felt the sting of all the times I wanted those words and didn't hear them, and the softening when they finally came. "Thank you," I said. We ate then, bowls of chili in our hands, cornbread with too much honey. Lily hid under the table as we cut slices of galette, her voice muffled, calling names so that Mr. Feldman got the first one and giggled like a child, then Teresa, then Eileen, then me. The tiny token, a little dried bean, showed up in Kayla's slice, and everyone cheered, and Kayla blushed and put the paper crown on her head without fuss, and for a moment she looked so silly and sweet that my heart did one of those flips we think are the domain of teenagers, and are, in fact, lifelong. All through the evening, small injustices bubbled up, and then were faced down by small kindnesses. Madison stood by the kitchen, watching me stir, and said, "I thought chili was just chili," as if what I had made had surprised her out of her certainty. Patrice tried to reorganize a tray, and Donna gently slipped it back to its original spot with a laugh and said, "You leave the fuss to Margaret. It's her language." Matt tried to pick up more than his share of plates, and Eileen shooed him out of the kitchen and said, "Go be with your girl." And he smiled at me over his shoulder like he was 12 and I was sending him back out to the yard. At 8, people gathered coats and kissed cheeks, and those who don't kiss said thank you, with hands that squeezed instead. The snow was steady now, the kind that would coat the sycamore branches and make the whole street hush again. Lily fell asleep on the middle step with one boot halfway on, and Matt lifted her, and Kayla tucked the crown into her pocket. Patrice took the glass star gently, like she'd realized it was glass after all, and could shatter with too much insisting, and she looked at me for a long second. "You set a lovely table," she said, and there was no extra in her voice, just those words. "Thank you," I said. After the door closed, I stood with my back against it and let the quiet rush in. Not empty, but full. The dishwasher hummed. The tree lights were soft in the window. The star held its light as if it had waited to do that for years, and this was its chance. I took off my gloves and laid them next to the shoebox on the table and slid the postcard inside next to the tissue paper. I wanted the memory of Santa Fe to be entwined with the memory of this feeling. My house, full and then gently emptied. My boundaries intact. My heart not aching from having been stepped on, but full from having been seen. There were still paper cups on the counter and a smear of honey by the butter dish and a line of wet from the boots by the door. I wiped the smear of honey with a cloth and smiled at the stickiness that clung, not resenting it, just acknowledging that sweetness is messy. I bent and straightened the boots and thought how many doors I have stood by, waiting for people to cross a threshold into something they didn't know they wanted. The next morning at church, we sang "We Three Kings," and the notes sat in my chest like something I'd put there on purpose. After the service, a woman I don't know well, who always wears scarves that look like they have interesting stories, came up and said, "My daughter says your party was wonderful." I blinked. The world is smaller than you think sometimes. "She's Madison's friend," she added, which made sense. "She said you talk about your life like it's a thing you made. I like that." I walked home through snow that squeaked. I have always loved that sound. It's the sound of winters that make you rosy-cheeked and honest. In the kitchen, I poured myself coffee and opened the group chat. Holiday logistics still at the top because no one knows how to switch out chat names. And anyway, it made me laugh now. Kayla had left a picture late the night before. Lily asleep with the paper crown on her forehead, crooked. "Thank you," Kayla had written. "We will plan together next year, and I won't move your star. Promise." I typed, "I'm glad you came. Next year, let's do a planning coffee in September. Menus, chores, who brings what, who cleans what. A plan we all like, on paper." I started to add a winking face and decided I didn't need to. The words stood. "On paper," Matt replied. "I'll make a spreadsheet." "Of course you will," I wrote, and added a small apple emoji because some jokes, teacher jokes, are badges we wear. There were still people in my life who would see what I had done, my boarding pass, my quiet 12th night, as selfish. The next day, at the pharmacy, a woman from the neighborhood who has an opinion about everything said, "I heard you skipped Christmas," and her mouth did that thing mouths do when they mean to smile and don't. An old humiliation flickered, that hot prickle at the base of the neck when you are accused of something and aren't sure if it's worse to explain or to say nothing. "I went to Santa Fe," I said. I studied the postcards in my mind like a level. I came back happy. "Well," she said, and puffed a little. That's nice for you." "It is," I said, and left it there. I didn't hand her the whole story to be sorted by someone else's preferences. I have learned that not every person is an audience you owe. At home, I sat at my kitchen table with a pad of paper and my favorite pen and started to write the list for next year. It was not a do-it-all list. It was a together list. Chili and cornbread could become turkey and gravy if there were enough hands in the kitchen and enough people who knew that dishes are not a punishment. They are a part of the meal. Lily could put on the star a different way next year, but this year's star would stay in the box with the postcard, the tissue paper not crinkled so much that it looked like chaos. I wrote, cheese board, Kayla, rolls, Matt with Lily, green bean casserole, Margaret, traditional, Haricott's vert salad, Patrice, elevated. I wrote, 2 trees, memory tree and Kayla's tree, both welcome. Star, box and hall closet, do not move without asking. I wrote, dogs come if paws are clean. Or better, dogs have a dog day at home with a new bone. I added a small note only I would see. Honey by butter dish, messy, good. That afternoon I took down the tree. I do it slowly, in the quiet, so the ornaments can remember where they go. The lighthouse cookie jar went back to the counter with a flourish, not to be tucked away next year or any year. When I reached the star, I paused. I held it for a long time, fingertip finding the smudge again. I could have cried then, from relief or the weight of the years, or because crying sometimes springs like a deer at the edge of a field when you aren't expecting it. I didn't. I held the star and thought, I will not be the quiet engine of a train that drags itself through snow alone anymore. I will be a passenger sometimes. I will stand in the vestibule and feel the cold and the speed. I will get off at a stop that is mine to get off at, and I will send myself a postcard. Neighbors talk. Family learns. Women my age stop me in the grocery and say, I heard about your 12th night, and good for you, in a way that is both gossip and benediction. Kayla texted me a week later, a picture of a star ornament she saw in a shop, similar to mine but not mine, and said, it made me think of you. She did not add elevated. She did not add anything else. I sent back a heart. I meant it. In February, when the sky goes low and the snow loses its romance, Lily and I will make hot cocoa after preschool, and she will stir too fast, and powder will leap like a startled rabbit onto the counter, and I will not mind. In March, when the ice breaks and the street looks like a mood you can't name, the amaryllis will bloom again, maybe 2 stalks this time. In April, I will buy pansies for the porch, tiny faces that turn toward the sun like students ready at the rug. In May, I will sit on the steps and watch the sycamores unfurl their leaves like green palms. In June, when the neighborhood kids dart through sprinklers and the UPS guy asks after my hydrangeas because his wife likes them, I will wave to Mr. Feldman with his paper towel roll in hand because he makes himself predictable in the best way. In July, I will go to the parade and not feel like I have to bring an extra cooler to make up for some deficit that exists only in my head. In August, I will go to the library and stack my arms with mysteries and novels, and 1 book of poems I promise I will not judge harshly this time. In September, we will have our planning coffee, and I will bring a pen that writes without scratching and a calm that does not waver when someone suggests we move the forest of things I love to make room for what they love. In October, I will buy cider donuts and sit on my porch steps and feel the way sugar grits between teeth, and how that is pleasure and not a crime. In November, I will light a candle for Robert, and also I will laugh at a joke Matt tells that is too silly and guffawing for polite company, and I will laugh anyway. And in December, I will open the shoebox and lift the star, and the postcard will be there, and it will remind me that I am allowed to leave when I need to, and I am also allowed to stay and ask for the seat to fit me. Both can be true. Both are the shape of my life now. The climax might have looked small from the outside. A woman holding a plastic star in a room full of Sunday people who take off their boots at the door. It did not feel small. It felt like setting a stone in a river and finding the way the water changed around it, the current adjusting, not angrily, but with respect. It felt like my kitchen, which has seen the worst and the best of me, looked back and said, "I see you." It felt like the kind of joy that does not shout. That night, lying in bed, the heater humming its lullaby, I thought of Santa Fe and the hush of the farolitos, and the boy carrying the bench for his grandmother. I thought of the woman on the street who said quiet is sometimes the loudest thing. The next morning, I tucked the shoebox with the star and the postcard back on the closet shelf. I wrote on the side in black marker, in my neat teacher script, star plus Santa Fe. Then, smaller, boundary. With a smile, because I could imagine someone in some far future pulling it down and smiling at my audacity. The river keeps moving. I am ready to wade in without forgetting where the bank is. When the next holiday comes, and there will always be one, when the next request feels more like a demand than a question, I will lay my hand on the shoebox and remember the night the star held fast, and the snow softened the whole world, and the people I love stood in my kitchen and saw me, not as the person who makes holidays happen, not as the party planner or the cleanup crew, or the one who can be handed a black garbage bag and expected to know what to do with it, but as a woman who stepped away when she needed to, and stepped back when she was ready, and said, "This is how we can do it, together or not at all." Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is book a ticket. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay home and put a star on a tree. I have done both now. The sky over Ohio is not Santa Fe's, but when the sun sets just right, it gets a little gold around the edges. That's enough. That's plenty. That's mine. I let the plane's hum settle under my bones like a promise, and when I stepped into Elaine's little kitchen, the world softened. Lemon bars cooling on the rack, her radio playing Pat's highlights between carols, and the steady clack of her needles. I put the star on her nightstand the way you lay a hand on your own shoulder, a small, stubborn pledge that I would not disappear into everyone else's light. Elaine brewed strong tea and listened without fixing, and for the first time in months, I ate a whole cookie without apologizing for taking space. Snow feathered down outside, and I read until the lamp went soft, the star warm against my palm like a compass that had finally been trusted. Meanwhile, the texts kept coming with little triumphs and honest stumbles. Photos of a slightly lopsided centerpiece, a video of Ashley turning the turkey and swearing she'd never thought basting was so satisfying, a breathless message from Daniel admitting he'd burned the gravy the first time. When he called it was later, his voice smaller and steadier, stripped of the old defensiveness. "Mom, we tried. It wasn't perfect, and I get it now." I listened, and I let him hear how the edges had frayed for me when gratitude became an expectation. He didn't demand me back. He asked how to do better. That asking sounded like a door unlocked. I flew home the next evening because hearing that question changed the shape of my wanting. The house smelled of rosemary and courage. Cheryl met me at the doorway with eyes that didn't slide past me to the casserole. Ashley handed me a blanket and didn't take it back. And Daniel stood with the gravy boat in both hands as if it were a small apology and an offering both. At the table they sat differently, not clutching their plates like armor but easing into conversation, asking for recipes and also for my thoughts on who should do what next year. We made a plan that included my recipes, my time, and my right to a seat that was honored, not taken for granted. When I placed the little applesauce cinnamon star in the center of the table, it felt less like an object and more like the map we'd all been missing. We laughed over a burnt edge and praised a properly moist slice. We passed the rolls instead of having them slid silently to the side. Cheryl later posted a photo and wrote, "Mama made the gravy," with an honest tag that made me feel seen. And Daniel stayed up late that night to help clean, because he'd finally understood that gratitude is a verb. There was forgiveness in the room, but also a new kind of respect. Quiet, steady, practical. The kind that builds houses rather than just decorating them. That star in my pocket has always been my compass, and now it sits where everyone can see it. A little reminder that love and boundaries can live at the same table. I went to Elaine to find myself again, and came home to find my place renewed. I learned that stepping back gave them room to stumble and to grow, and it gave me the freedom to be both generous and whole. If this touched you, tell me what boundary you once set that changed a relationship. Leave a like and subscribe so we can keep making room for the people we love, together with candor and kindness.